They built their palace on lies and betrayal. I came with fire.
The champagne bubbles caught the restaurant's amber light like tiny diamonds, and Lila raised her glass with that practiced smile she'd perfected at 1,000 charity galas. I knew that smile. It was the one she used when she wanted something expensive. "Jason makes real money," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for the couple at the next table to hear. "You'll be fine." I sat there in my Tom Ford suit, the one she'd picked out last Christmas, watching my wife of 8 years deliver my execution with the grace of a socialite cutting a ribbon. The restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of Manhattan's elite. And here I was, Ethan Cole, Chief Operating Officer of Meridian Capital, being dismissed like a failed investment. "If you're sure," I said, keeping my voice gentle. No scene. No protest. I'd learned long ago that Lila thrived on drama, fed on it like oxygen. Denying her that satisfaction was the first small victory. My phone buzzed against the white tablecloth. Board options review, Carr, tomorrow 9 a.m. Jason Carr. The same Jason who was apparently making real money and had swept my wife off her feet with his swagger and his Tribeca penthouse. Lila leaned forward, her diamond earrings, the ones I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary, catching the light. "I've already moved my things to Jason's place. My lawyer will be in touch about the apartment and the assets." "Of course," I said, reaching for my water glass. My hand didn't shake. 20 years in finance had taught me to control my reactions, even when my world was collapsing in real time. She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I studied her face. The face I'd fallen in love with at a Columbia alumni mixer 9 years ago. She'd been radiant then, ambitious and hungry in a way that had excited me. Now that same hunger had devoured our marriage. "What would you like me to say?" "I don't know, something, anything." Her voice cracked slightly, the first genuine emotion she'd shown all evening. I could have said a lot of things. I could have reminded her that Jason Carr was one of our investors, that he'd signed his partnership agreement just 6 months ago. I could have mentioned that his buy-in had come with some very specific clauses about conduct and conflicts of interest. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened a secure document. Conduct and Conflict Writer Carr. The language was crystal clear. "Undisclosed consideration constituting egregious breach of fiduciary duty shall result in immediate termination and asset clawback." Lila was gathering her purse, her movements sharp and efficient. "I'll be at the Harbor Foundation Gala next week. Try not to make it awkward." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. She paused at the edge of our table, something flickering across her face that might have been regret. "Ethan, have a good evening, Lila." After she left, I sat alone for another 10 minutes, watching the steam rise from my untouched coffee. The other diners continued their conversations, completely unaware that they'd just witnessed the end of my marriage and the beginning of something else entirely. I paid the check and walked out into the October night. The cool air hit my face like a slap, and for just one moment, one exhale, I let my mask drop. Then I smiled. It wasn't the practiced smile of a corporate executive or the patient smile of a betrayed husband. It was the smile of a man who'd been underestimated. 6 months earlier, I'd been in my corner office on the 32nd floor of the Meridian building, reviewing partnership agreements when Jason Carr had strutted in like he owned the place. He was everything I wasn't. Loud, flashy, the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and talked about his weekend in the Hamptons. "Ethan, my man!" He grabbed my hand in one of those aggressive handshakes meant to establish dominance. "Ready to make some serious money together?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk, noting how he'd immediately started examining the art on my walls, cataloging value. Let's go through the terms one more time. The partnership agreement was 47 pages of carefully crafted language, and Jason's attorney had skimmed it like a magazine. That should have been my first warning. The Conduct and Conflict Writer was buried on page 39 in subsection 12C, written in the kind of dense legal prose that made most people's eyes glaze over. "If he strays, you own him," my counsel had murmured after Jason and his lawyer had left. "He won't read the footnotes," I'd replied. And he hadn't. The signature was bold and confident, the pen strokes of a man who'd never met a contract he couldn't charm his way out of. But charm didn't mean much when it came to federal ethics violations. Now, 3 blocks from the restaurant where my marriage had just ended, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through 6 months of carefully documented irregularities. Jason had been pushing side letters with clients, offering considerations that weren't properly disclosed, using his position at Meridian to leverage deals that benefited his personal portfolio. The CFO had flagged it early. Carr's getting creative with his client relationships, he'd told me during a routine compliance review. Might want to keep an eye on that. I'd kept more than an eye on it. I'd built a case file that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. My phone rang as I reached the corner of 5th and Broadway. The caller ID showed Sam Rhodes, Jason's ex-girlfriend, though I suspected there was more to that story. Ethan, I heard about tonight. News travels fast. In our circle, it travels at the speed of Instagram. Her voice was dry, controlled. I'm sorry. Are you? There was a pause. Jason's not what he appears to be. I know exactly what he is. Do you? Because I have records, Ethan, bank statements, invoices, some very interesting correspondence between Jason and his offshore accounts. I stopped walking. Why are you telling me this? Because some people deserve what's coming to them, and some people deserve justice. The line went quiet, except for the sound of traffic. Finally, she spoke again. The Harbor Foundation Gala is next week. Jason's planning to announce some big new venture with Lila on his arm. Might be interesting if someone had better news to share. What kind of news? The kind that comes with proper documentation and regulatory approval. The kind Jason never bothered to get. After she hung up, I stood on the corner for another 5 minutes, watching the city flow around me like water around a stone. Then I opened my contacts and started making calls. The Harbor Foundation Gallery buzzed with the kind of controlled energy that came from mixing wealthy donors with open bars. I'd arrived alone, which immediately drew glances from the usual suspects, the social climbers who fed on gossip like sharks scenting blood. Lila was holding court near the Monet, her red dress catching the gallery lights as she gestured animatedly to a circle of admirers. Jason stood beside her, one possessive hand on her lower back, the other wrapped around a tumbler of what looked like aged whiskey. They made a striking couple, I had to admit. Jason's silver hair and expensive suit complemented Lila's brunette elegance perfectly. They looked like they belonged together, like they'd been designed by the same luxury brand. Quite a performance, said a voice beside me. I turned to find Sam Rhodes studying the same scene, a glass of white wine in her hand. She was beautiful in an understated way. Sharp cheekbones, intelligent eyes, the kind of woman who didn't need to announce her presence because her confidence did it for her. You came, I said. I told you I had records. Did you think I was bluffing? She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small flash drive. Bank transfers, shell company formations, some very creative accounting. Jason's been building a house of cards, and your wife is about to become collateral damage. I slipped the drive into my jacket pocket. Why help me? Because Jason destroyed my career when I asked too many questions about his finances. Because he's been using Meridian's reputation to legitimize deals that would make a mob accountant blush. And because, she paused, watching as Lila threw her head back in practiced laughter. Because some women think they can climb any ladder, no matter who gets crushed underneath. Across the gallery, Jason noticed us watching and raised his glass in a mock toast. The gesture was pure arrogance, the kind of territorial display that alpha males use to mark their territory. He's richer, Sam said quietly. Or just more leveraged? That depends on his covenants. She smiled for the first time that evening, and it transformed her entire face. I like you, Ethan Cole. I like your timing. We moved through the gallery like a well-rehearsed dance, stopping to admire paintings and exchange pleasantries with other guests. But we were really studying the room, cataloging relationships, noting which donors were gravitating toward Jason and which were keeping their distance. The Pemberton account, Sam murmured as we paused in front of a Picasso sketch. Jason's been billing them for services through a shell company he owns. Meridian doesn't see a dime. That's a federal offense. It gets worse. The Morrison Foundation, the Blackwood Trust, the entire East Coast Cultural Preservation Initiative, he's been skimming management fees for 2 years. I felt something cold and precise settle in my chest. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about every investor who'd trusted Meridian with their money, every client who'd believed in our reputation for ethical dealings. Near the back of the gallery, away from the main crowd, I pulled out my phone and started a voice memo. Action items. Initiate compliance audit, review all car-client relationships, prepare ethics committee documentation. My voice was calm, surgical, not angry. Anger was wasteful. This was about precision. The foundation gala is in 2 weeks, Sam said. Jason's planning to announce some new venture, probably using your separation as a launching pad for his independent practice. What kind of venture? The kind that requires investor confidence and regulatory approval. The kind he'll never get once the ethics committee finishes with him. As we walked back toward the main gallery, Lila caught my eye across the room. For a moment, her smile faltered, and I saw something that might have been uncertainty. Then, Jason whispered something in her ear, and she laughed again, the sound bright and brittle as breaking glass. She has no idea, does she? Sam asked. She will. My law firm occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown, and at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, the conference room felt like a war room. Coffee cups and case files covered the polished mahogany table, and my attorney, Patricia Vance, looked like a general preparing for battle. This is substantial, she said, dropping a thick folder onto the table with a satisfying thud. Shell companies, undisclosed payments, kickbacks disguised as consulting fees, and this voice memo. She hit play on her laptop. Jason's voice filled the room, slightly slurred from what sounded like a 3-martini lunch. Look, the clients don't need to know every detail. We structure it as a management fee, run it through the Cayman entity, and everybody's happy. Where did you get this? Patricia asked. Client dinner 6 weeks ago. Jason had a few too many and started bragging about his offshore strategies. I was recording notes for our compliance review. Lucky for us, unlucky for him. She closed the laptop. This is enough for a criminal referral, Ethan. We're talking wire fraud, money laundering, breach of fiduciary duty. I stared out the conference room window at the city below. Somewhere down there, Lila was probably having brunch with her new friends, planning her new life with a man who was about to lose everything. I want this clean, I said. No splash damage, no innocent sufferers. Just Jason. What about your wife? What about her? Patricia had been my attorney for 5 years, had handled everything from SEC investigations to hostile takeovers. She knew me well enough to read the subtext. This isn't just about the money, is it? It's about trust, about consequences. I turned back to face her. About what happens when people think they're untouchable. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Sam Rhodes in a coffee shop near the Met. She'd brought her own files, bank statements, email printouts, photographs of documents that Jason had apparently been careless enough to leave lying around his apartment. He kept everything, she said, sliding a manila envelope across the small table. Invoices for services never rendered, correspondence with offshore banks, even a handwritten note about hiding assets from the IRS. I examined the documents, feeling that cold precision settling deeper in my chest. This is thorough. I'm a curator, Ethan. I'm trained to catalog and preserve things, even things that other people would rather forget. Why keep all this? Her laugh was bitter. Insurance. I knew what kind of man Jason was, even when I was sleeping with him. Women like me learn to protect ourselves. The coffee shop hummed with the quiet conversations of morning customers, and for a moment we sat in silence, 2 people bound together by a common enemy. There's something else, Sam said finally. The Harbor Foundation Gala next week. Jason's planning to announce his new venture, something called Meridian East. He's been telling potential investors that he's breaking away to start his own fund, using our client relationships, and your wife as his trophy co-founder. Apparently, she's been positioning herself as some kind of cultural investment expert. I almost laughed. Lila's expertise extended to spending money on art and organizing charity auctions. The idea of her managing investments was like putting a socialite in charge of a nuclear reactor. He's going to humiliate himself, I said. Only if someone doesn't stop him first. Sam leaned forward. The ethics committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday. If you move fast, you can have him removed before he ever gets to make his announcement. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message to Patricia. Convene emergency ethics committee meeting. All documentation ready for immediate presentation. Her response came back within minutes. Thursday, 2 p.m., conference room A. Come prepared for war. As I walked Sam to the subway, she touched my arm. Ethan, when this is over, when Jason's gone and your wife realizes what she's lost. What then? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since this whole thing started. She was asking about possibilities, about what might happen when the dust settled and we were both free from the wreckage of our previous relationships. Then we see who we are when we're not defined by other people's mistakes. She smiled and disappeared down the subway stairs, leaving me alone on the sidewalk with my phone buzzing with messages from Patricia, from the compliance department, from board members, who were finally starting to ask the right questions about Jason Carr. The Meridian boardroom felt different on Thursday afternoon. The same floor-to-ceiling windows, the same mahogany table, the same leather chairs. But the atmosphere was charged with the kind of tension that preceded corporate executions. Jason sat at one end of the table, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, while Patricia arranged her evidence like a prosecutor preparing for a closing argument. 5 board members, 3 compliance officers, and the general counsel, all of them looking at exhibits projected on the wall-mounted screen in neutral, damning fonts. Exhibit A, Patricia said, clicking to the first slide. Bank transfer of $2.3 million from the Morrison Foundation to Cayman Isle Holdings, LLC, a shell company owned entirely by Jason Carr. Services listed as Cultural Preservation Consulting. No contract on file with Meridian. No oversight. No approval. Jason's attorney cleared his throat. My client was pursuing legitimate business opportunities. Exhibit B. Patricia clicked again. Voice recording from September 15th, in which Mr. Carr explicitly describes hiding management fees from clients. Jason's voice filled the room again. Run it through the Cayman entity, and everybody's happy. I watched Jason's face as he heard his own words played back to the room. The color drained from his cheeks, and his hands clenched into fists on the table. This is taken out of context, he said, his voice strained. I was describing a hypothetical scenario. Exhibit C. Patricia was relentless. Email correspondence between Mr. Carr and Offshore Banking Solutions, dated October 2nd, detailing the establishment of 3 additional shell companies for the purpose of, quote, optimizing client fee structures without regulatory oversight. The board members exchanged glances. These were serious people, former CEOs, respected investors, people who understood that reputation was everything in our business. Through the glass wall, I could see Lila in the reception area, her face pressed to her phone, probably trying to figure out why Jason's building access had been revoked that morning. The recommendation, Patricia continued, is immediate termination for cause, asset freeze pending investigation, and referral to the Securities and Exchange Commission for possible criminal prosecution. Jason shot to his feet. This is BS. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Carr, said the board chairman, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in finance. You signed a conduct agreement. You violated that agreement. The consequences were clearly stated. The vote was unanimous. Immediate termination, forfeiture of partnership shares, and activation of the clawback clause that would recover every penny Jason had stolen from our clients. As security escorted him from the building, Jason turned back to look at me through the conference room glass. His expression was pure hatred, the look of a man who'd just realized he'd been outplayed by someone he'd underestimated. I felt my phone buzz with a text from Sam. Is it done? Phase 1 complete, I typed back. An hour later, I was standing at my office window, watching Jason argue with Lila on the sidewalk 32 floors below. Even from that distance, I could read their body language, his desperate gestures, her growing alarm as she began to understand what had happened. My assistant knocked on the door. The Wall Street Journal is on line 3. They're asking about the Carr termination. Tell them we have no comment at this time, but that a full statement will be available tomorrow morning. She paused in the doorway. Sir, your wife called. She'd like to speak with you. I'm in meetings all afternoon. After she left, I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. Patricia had given me the number for a reporter at the Financial Times, someone who specialized in ethics violations and white-collar crime. This is Ethan Cole, I said when he answered. I have a story for you. By 6 p.m., the first articles were already online. Meridian Capital terminates senior partner for ethics violations. Investment firm discovers $1 million fraud scheme. Carr investigation triggers SEC inquiry. My phone rang constantly. Reporters, board members, clients who wanted to know if their investments were safe. I took the important calls and let the rest go to voicemail. At 7, Patricia called with an update. The SEC is opening a formal investigation. The U.S. Attorney's Office is interested. And Jason's other clients are starting to ask questions about their own accounts. How bad is it for him? Career over, reputation destroyed, possible criminal charges. Oh, and his ex-wife's divorce attorney just filed for an emergency asset freeze. After I hung up, I sat in my dark office and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere down there, Jason was probably calling in favors, trying to salvage what was left of his life. And Lila was probably realizing that her grand new adventure had just turned into a nightmare. My computer chimed with an email from Sam. Dinner tomorrow? I think we should discuss next steps. I typed back, looking forward to it. The photographs hit the gossip blogs at exactly 11:47 a.m. on Friday. Lila and Jason on the sidewalk outside his building, her face twisted with rage, his hands raised in what looked like either surrender or desperation. Lovers quarrel or business disaster, read the headline on page 6. The caption was even better. Socialite Lila Cole and disgraced investor Jason Carr have heated exchange outside Tribeca penthouse. I was reading the article when my assistant buzzed in. The Financial Times reporter is here for your 2 p.m. Interview. James Morrison was everything I'd expected from his byline photo. Sharp suit, sharper questions, and the kind of digital recorder that captured every inflection. He'd done his homework too. The questions came fast and precise. Mr. Cole, how long were you aware of Mr. Carr's allegedly fraudulent activities? Our compliance department flagged irregularities 6 months ago. We conducted a thorough investigation before taking action. Was your decision to terminate Mr. Carr influenced by his relationship with your estranged wife? I met his eyes directly. Jason Carr was terminated because he violated his fiduciary duties to our clients and breached his conduct agreement with Meridian Capital. Personal relationships had no bearing on our decision. But the timing? The timing reflects our commitment to acting swiftly when we discover potential fraud. Our clients' interests come first, always. After he left, I pulled up the afternoon trading reports. Meridian's stock had actually gained 3 points since the termination announcement. The market liked decisive action, liked knowing that we policed our own ranks. Patricia called at 4 with another update. Jason's largest client just requested an immediate audit of their account. Apparently, they're missing about $800,000 in management fees that were supposed to be reinvested. How's his legal situation looking? Criminal referral goes to the U.S. attorney next week. His civil attorney's already talking about plea agreements. That evening, I met Sam at a small Italian restaurant in Soho, the kind of place that didn't take reservations, but somehow always had a table for the right people. She looked elegant in black wool and pearls, like she'd stepped out of a Hitchcock film. You look like a man who's had a good day, she said, raising her wine glass. Justice has a certain appeal. We talked about art, about her work at the Metropolitan Museum, about everything except the elephant in the room. It wasn't until dessert arrived that she brought up Jason. He called me this afternoon, she said. Begging, mostly. Wanted me to testify as a character witness. What did you tell him? I told him that character witnesses are supposed to have good things to say about your character. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in days. And Lila? According to my sources at the Harbor Foundation, she's been making frantic calls to board members, trying to distance herself from Jason's business dealings. Too late for that. Sam reached across the table and touched my hand. Ethan, what you did this week, it was necessary, but be careful it doesn't consume you. What do you mean? Revenge is like a pill. The first hit feels incredible, but you always need more to get the same high. I looked at her across the candlelit table, this woman who'd helped me destroy the man who'd destroyed her own career. What if it's not about revenge? What if it's about justice? Then you stop when justice is served. But even as I nodded, I knew I wasn't ready to stop. Jason was finished. Career over, reputation destroyed, legal troubles mounting. But Lila was still out there, still playing her social games, still believing she could spin her way out of any situation. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. This isn't over, Ethan. I know what you did. I know why you did it. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. L. I showed the message to Sam. She read it, then looked up at me with something that might have been concern. She's going to fight back, she said. Let her try. But as we walked out into the cool October night, I was already planning my next move. The Harbor Foundation Gala was 2 weeks away, and Lila would be there, probably trying to salvage her reputation and her social standing. It was time to remind her that some ladders, once pulled away, couldn't be climbed again. The Harbor Foundation's annual gala was Manhattan society at its most polished, a carefully choreographed display of wealth, influence, and charitable goodwill held in the museum's soaring Great Hall. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over women in designer gowns and men in custom tuxedos, all of them moving through the space like pieces on a very expensive chessboard. I arrived with Sam on my arm, and the reaction was immediate. Conversations paused, heads turned, and I could practically feel the speculation crackling through the room like static electricity. Ethan Cole, the cuckolded husband, showing up with Jason Carr's stunning ex-girlfriend. The symbolism was too perfect for the gossip columnists to ignore. Lila stood near the museum's famous Egyptian sarcophagus, holding court with a smaller crowd than usual. Her emerald gown was spectacular, the kind of dress that cost more than most people's cars. But there was something brittle in her smile, something desperate in the way she gestured while telling what was probably a carefully rehearsed story about her. Temporary separation from Meridian's unfortunate situation. "She's working the room hard," Sam murmured as we accepted champagne from a passing waiter. "Damage control. She's trying to separate herself from Jason before the criminal charges hit the papers." "When will that happen?" "Monday morning. The U.S. AITA attorney's office likes to time these things for maximum media impact." We moved through the crowd, greeting donors and board members, playing our own careful game of social positioning. I was, after all, still the COO of one of the city's most successful investment firms, and tonight's gala would determine whether my personal scandal would affect my professional reputation. The answer came when board member Charles Pemberton approached with his wife and another couple. "Ethan," he said, extending his hand. "Hell of a week. How are you holding up?" "Better than expected." "The firm's reputation remains solid, which is what matters." "Damn right, that car business, unconscionable. Thank God you caught it when you did." Mrs. Pemberton touched Sam's arm. "Miss Rhodes, I loved your exhibition on contemporary sculpture. Will you be joining us at the Meridian table this evening?" The question carried layers of meaning. Sitting at the Meridian table was tantamount to a public declaration of alliance, both personal and professional. "I'd be honored," Sam replied. As the Pembertons moved away, I felt my phone vibrate with a text from Patricia. "Criminal indictment unsealed, Monday 9 a.m. Fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, 23 counts total." I showed the message to Sam. She read it and looked across the room at Lila, who was now deep in conversation with Harbor Foundation Chairman David Whitmore. "She doesn't know yet," Sam said. "She will." The evening's program began with cocktails and silent auction bidding, followed by dinner and the presentation of the Foundation's annual awards. I'd been invited to present the Ethics and Philanthropy Award, a piece of timing so perfect it felt like divine intervention. But first, there was an announcement to make. During the cocktail hour, I found myself at the podium, looking out at 300 of Manhattan's most influential people. In the audience, Lila had moved closer to the front, clearly expecting some kind of public humiliation or emotional breakdown. Instead, I smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to share some exciting news about Meridian Capital's future." The room quieted, conversations trailing off as people turned their attention to the stage. Despite recent challenges involving a former partner's ethical violations, Meridian remains committed to responsible investing and transparent client relationships. To that end, I'm pleased to announce a new joint venture with the Morrison Cultural Trust, led by Dr. Samantha Rhodes. Sam stood as applause rippled through the room. She looked radiant under the gallery lights, every inch the accomplished professional she was. "The Morrison Meridian Cultural Investment Initiative will focus on ethical arts funding and cultural preservation," I continued. "Dr. Rhodes brings 20 years of expertise in cultural asset management and a commitment to transparent, accountable investing." More applause. I caught Lila's eye across the room and saw her face go pale as she realized what was happening. The Morrison Trust had been Jason's largest client, the one that was now missing $800,000 in management fees. "Furthermore," I said, Meridian Capital will be implementing the industry's most stringent ethics and transparency standards, developed in consultation with federal regulators and designed to ensure that our clients' interests always come first. As I left the podium, I felt my phone buzzing with notifications. The business press was already picking up the story, and my assistant was fielding calls from journalists wanting more details about the new venture. During dinner, I sat between Sam and board member Margaret Chen, watching as Lila worked her way around the room like a woman trying to plug a dozen leaks with 10 fingers. Every conversation seemed to go badly. Donors who'd been friendly last month were now polite but distant. Board members who'd once sought her advice were suddenly very busy. The final blow came during the awards presentation. As I handed over the Ethics in Philanthropy Award to a children's hospital CEO, the recipient made an impromptu comment about the importance of partners who share our values and accountability. The message was clear. In the new post, Jason, landscape reputation mattered more than connections, and ethical behavior trumped social climbing. After the ceremony, as guests filtered out into the October night, Lila approached our table. She looked beautiful and desperate, like a drowning woman reaching for a life preserver that kept floating just out of reach. "Ethan," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "congratulations on your new venture." "Thank you." She looked at Sam, then back at me. "I was hoping we could talk privately, about the apartment, about everything. My attorney will handle the property division." "That's not what I meant." For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something that looked almost like regret. But then her phone buzzed with what was probably another crisis to manage, and the moment passed. "Enjoy your evening, Lila," I said. As she walked away, Sam leaned close to my ear. That was elegant. Surgical. It's not over yet. But even as I said it, I could feel something shifting inside me. The anger that had driven me for weeks was giving way to something colder, more calculating. Jason was finished, but Lila was still playing the game, still believing she could charm her way back to the top of the social ladder. It was time to show her what happened when someone pulled that ladder away. Sunday night, my apartment felt like a museum after closing time. Elegant, expensive, and utterly empty. I'd been deleting old photographs from my phone, a methodical process that should have been more emotional than it was. Instead, it felt like updating a database, removing outdated entries from my personal archive. Lila at our wedding, radiant in white silk. Delete. Lila at the Met Gala, posing beside a Rothko. Delete. Lila on vacation in Tuscany, laughing at something I couldn't remember. Delete. The intercom buzzed at 9:47 p.m. "Mr. Cole, your wife is here to see you." I almost told the doorman to send her away, but curiosity won. What could Lila possibly have to say that she hadn't already said through her divorce attorney? She appeared at my door 10 minutes later, and it was clear she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and she clutched a small purse like it contained the last of her dignity. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. I stepped aside to let her in. She moved through the living room, our living room until recently, like a ghost revisiting the scene of her former life. "You redecorated." "I removed some things." She sank onto the sofa where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies, arguing about politics, planning our future. Now it felt like furniture in a hotel lobby, functional, but devoid of meaning. "Jason's been arrested," she said without preamble. "I heard. 23 federal charges. His attorney says he's looking at 15 to 20 years. I poured myself a scotch and didn't offer her one. What do you want, Lila?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I want to know if you're happy now. I'm satisfied with the outcome." That's not the same thing. I studied her face, searching for the woman I'd fallen in love with 9 years ago. She was still there, buried under layers of ambition and disappointment, but she felt like a stranger wearing my wife's skin. "You destroyed him," she continued. "Systematically, methodically. You set him up and then watched him fall. I documented his crimes and reported them to the appropriate authorities." "Don't," her voice cracked. "Don't give me corporate speak. This is me, Ethan. I know you. I know what you're capable of when someone crosses you." She was right, of course. Jason's destruction hadn't been an accident or a matter of simple justice. It had been a campaign, carefully planned and flawlessly executed. But acknowledging that would have been like confessing to a crime I wasn't sure I'd committed. "He stole from our clients," I said. He violated his fiduciary duties. He committed federal crimes. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd fight for me. The words came out as barely a whisper. I thought you'd at least try to win me back. Win you back from a man who was embezzling millions? Win you back with what? Flowers and dinner reservations? She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that had once seemed so full of promise. I made a mistake, Ethan. A terrible mistake. But you've become someone I don't recognize. I've become someone who doesn't pay for other people's ladders. She turned around, confusion flickering across her face. What does that mean? It means I'm done enabling your social climbing. Done funding your charity galas and gallery openings and designer dresses. Done pretending that your friendships aren't transactions and your love isn't conditional on my net worth. That's not fair. Fair, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You left me for a criminal, Lila. You chose flash over substance, crime over character, and now you want me to feel sorry for you because it didn't work out? She moved toward me, desperation making her movements sharp and uncoordinated. I can fix this. We can fix this. Jason's gone, and I know I was wrong, and— Stop! The single word hung in the air between us like a blade. She froze, her hand extended toward me, her mouth still open around whatever plea she'd been about to make. It's over, Lila. The marriage, the life we built, the woman I thought I knew, all of it. Over. She stared at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out something small and gold, her wedding ring. I've been carrying this around for weeks, she said, placing it on the coffee table between us. Hoping that— Keep it, I said. Sell it. Whatever you want. I don't want the money. I want my husband back. Your husband died in that restaurant 2 weeks ago. You killed him with a champagne smile. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You're cruel. I'm honest. There's a difference. After she left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching the traffic flow along Fifth Avenue like blood through arteries. My phone buzzed with a message from my attorney. DA's office called. They want to discuss Jason's cooperation in a larger investigation. Looks like he was part of something bigger. I typed back, schedule the meeting. Then I opened my laptop and started researching the Harbor Foundation's donor database. If Jason had been part of a larger scheme, it was possible that Lila's social circle had been compromised as well. It was time to find out how deep the corruption went. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of October wind that stripped leaves from trees and reminded everyone that winter was coming. I stood outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, watching news vans set up for what would undoubtedly be a media circus. Jason's arraignment was scheduled for 10 a.m., but the real drama would come later in the day when his attorney filed a wrongful termination suit against Meridian. It was a desperate Hail Mary, claimed that he'd been fired for personal reasons rather than criminal behavior, but it was all he had left. Patricia met me at the courthouse steps, looking like a general prepared for battle. His attorney's going for the scorched earth approach, she warned. They'll claim you fabricated evidence that the termination was motivated by jealousy over your wife. Let them try. They will. And they'll put Lila on the stand to testify about your marriage, your character, your alleged vindictive nature. I adjusted my tie and checked my watch. Good. I want her under oath. The arraignment itself was perfunctory. Jason pleaded not guilty to all 23 counts, his attorney made noise about fighting the charges, and the judge set bail at $2 million. Jason's family posted bond, but the damage was done. By noon, every financial news outlet in the country was running the story. The wrongful termination hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. in civil court, and Jason's attorney, David Sterling, came out swinging. Your Honor, he began, this case isn't about ethics violations or criminal behavior. It's about a jealous husband who used his corporate position to destroy the man who stole his wife. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Patricia, watching Sterling pace in front of the judge like a prosecutor making his closing argument. He was good, expensive, and experienced, but he was working with a weak hand. Mr. Cole discovered his wife's relationship with my client and immediately began a campaign of harassment and intimidation designed to destroy Mr. Carr's career and reputation. Patricia stood to object, but the judge waved her down. I'll hear the argument, counselor. Sterling pulled out his first exhibit, a timeline that supposedly showed the correlation between my discovery of Lila's affair and the initiation of the ethics investigation. The evidence will show that Mr. Cole knew about these alleged irregularities for months, but took no action until his personal life was affected. That's not ethical compliance. That's personal revenge. When it was Patricia's turn, she walked to the evidence table and picked up a thick folder. Your Honor, this is Mr. Carr's Meridian Capital Conduct Agreement, signed by him 6 months ago. Page 39, subsection 12C, clearly states that any undisclosed conflicts of interest constitute grounds for immediate termination. She clicked a remote, and the wall-mounted screen filled with bank records. These are transfers from client accounts to shell companies owned by Mr. Carr. $2.3 million in undisclosed management fees. Mr. Sterling wants to call this a jealous husband's revenge. I call it embezzlement. The next exhibit was the voice recording, Jason's own words describing how to hide money from clients and regulators. Mr. Carr recorded himself committing federal crimes, Patricia continued. Mr. Cole simply did his duty as a corporate officer by reporting those crimes to the appropriate authorities. Sterling tried to recover with character witnesses, colleagues who testified about Jason's philanthropy, his community involvement, his dedication to clients. But Patricia countered with forensic accountants who detailed the scope of his theft, compliance officers who described the patterns of deception, and federal agents who explained the ongoing criminal investigation. The judge took a 30-minute recess to review the evidence. When he returned, his expression was grim. Mr. Sterling, your client signed a conduct agreement that explicitly prohibited the behavior he's accused of. The evidence suggests that behavior occurred. The termination appears to have been justified under the terms of that agreement. Sterling stood to protest, but the judge continued. Furthermore, the court notes that Mr. Carr is currently under federal indictment for crimes directly related to his employment at Meridian Capital. Motion dismissed. As we left the courthouse, Sterling was already on his phone with reporters, spinning the loss as a temporary setback in a longer legal battle. But I could see in his face that he knew the truth. Jason was finished, and no amount of legal maneuvering would change that. Patricia and I walked to a small cafe near the courthouse where she ordered coffee, and I stared out the window at the late afternoon crowd. It's over, she said. The wrongful termination suit was his last shot. After today, Jason Carr is a cautionary tale. What about the criminal case? His attorney will try to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence is overwhelming. He's looking at significant prison time. I should have felt satisfied. Jason was facing federal prosecution. His career was destroyed. His reputation was in ruins. Justice had been served with surgical precision. So why did I feel empty? My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Saw the news. Drinks tonight? I typed back. My place. 8 o'clock. As I walked back to my office through the gathering dusk, I realized that destroying Jason had been the easy part. He'd been guilty, his crimes documented, his downfall inevitable. But Lila was still out there, still playing her social games, still believing she could climb back to the top of whatever ladder she could find. And I wasn't done with her yet. Sam arrived at my apartment carrying a bottle of wine and the kind of quiet satisfaction that came from watching justice prevail. The news was already playing on every financial channel. Stock footage of Jason in handcuffs, interviews with federal prosecutors, talking heads discussing the broader implications for the investment industry. To the end of an era, Sam said, raising her glass. To accountability. We clinked glasses and settled onto the sofa, watching the coverage with the detached interest of people who'd orchestrated the entire drama from behind the scenes. How do you feel? She asked. Tired, satisfied, empty. I paused, searching for the right word. Complete, maybe. The lead story on CNN shifted to broader coverage of white-collar crime prosecutions, and there was Jason's mugshot filling the screen. The swagger replaced by something that looked like shell shock. 23 counts, Sam murmured. His attorney says he might cooperate in a larger investigation. Apparently, the scheme goes deeper than just our clients. The FBI thinks Jason was part of a network that's been operating for years. Sam turned to look at me. And Lila? What about her? Is she part of the investigation? I'd been wondering the same thing. Lila had been Jason's public face, his entree into New York's social elite, his connection to wealthy donors and foundation boards. If the FBI was looking at a broader conspiracy, her role would inevitably come under scrutiny. She claims she knew nothing about the business side, I said. Do you believe her? I thought about it. Really thought about it for the first time since this whole thing started. Lila was ambitious and status conscious, but she wasn't particularly sophisticated about finance. Her interest in Jason had been about lifestyle, not investment strategies. Yes, I said finally. I think she was a useful idiot rather than an active participant. That's almost worse, isn't it? Being destroyed because you were too shallow to understand what you were involved in? My phone buzzed with a news alert. Car assets frozen. Federal court issues emergency order. Sam read over my shoulder. His penthouse, his art collection, even his offshore accounts. They're seizing everything. Where does that leave Lila? Homeless and broke, probably. Her name was on some of the lease agreements. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been pity. Lila had made her choice, had chosen flash over substance, crime over character, but the consequences were harsher than even I had anticipated. The Harbor Foundation called this afternoon, Sam said. They're asking me to join the board to help rebuild their reputation after the Jason scandal. Congratulations. It means I'll be working with some of the same people who used to worship Jason and Lila. The same people who are now pretending they never trusted them? Welcome to high society. Today's pariah is tomorrow's cautionary tale. We finished the wine and ordered dinner from a Thai place that delivered, eating pad Thai and talking about everything except the obvious question hanging between us. What happened next? The campaign against Jason had given us purpose, had bound us together in common cause. But now that it was over, now that justice had been served and the guilty punished, what were we to each other? I should go, Sam said around 10 o'clock. You don't have to. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing possibilities, calculating risks. Finally, she shook her head. Tonight, I think I do. This whole thing, Jason, the investigation, your divorce, it's been intense. Maybe too intense to think clearly about what comes next. She was right, of course. The last 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of strategy and execution, of careful moves and calculated risks. We'd been partners in justice, but that didn't necessarily make us partners in life. After she left, I stood at my window looking out at the city lights and feeling something I hadn't experienced since this whole thing started. Uncertainty. Jason was finished. Lila was collateral damage. The immediate crisis was over. But as I watched the traffic flow along Fifth Avenue, I realized that destroying Jason had only been the beginning. He'd been part of a larger system, a network of wealthy people who believed that rules were for other people, that money could buy immunity from consequences. The Harbor Foundation, the cultural preservation boards, the entire ecosystem of tax-deductible philanthropy that provided cover for people like Jason, it was all still there, still operating, still enabling the kind of corruption that had nearly destroyed Meridian's reputation. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. Meridian Capital Ethics Initiative, Phase 2. If Jason had taught me anything, it was that corruption was like cancer. You had to cut out all of it, or it would just metastasize somewhere else. Time to clean house. The Whitmore Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower on Park Avenue, and David Whitmore himself looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a philanthropic power broker. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of practiced sincerity that came from decades of asking wealthy people for money. Ethan, he said, rising from behind his mahogany desk. Thank you for coming. Coffee, please. I'd requested this meeting 3 days after the Jason verdict, ostensibly to discuss Meridian's continued partnership with the Foundation's cultural initiatives. In reality, I was here to conduct an audit of a different kind. Terrible business with Jason, Whitmore said, settling back into his chair. Who would have thought? Such a charming man, such passion for the arts. Charm can be deceiving. Indeed, the board is still reeling. We're conducting a full review of all our investment relationships, of course. Can't be too careful. I pulled out a folder and placed it on his desk. That's actually why I'm here. Meridian has developed new transparency standards for all our philanthropic partnerships. We'd like the Whitmore Foundation to be our pilot program. His smile faltered slightly. What kind of standards? Full financial disclosure for all board members and major donors, independent audits of investment performance, public reporting of administrative expenses and compensation. That seems extensive. Necessary, I'd say. In light of recent events. Whitmore opened the folder and scanned the documents I'd prepared. A comprehensive ethics package that would effectively strip away the privacy and opacity that organizations like his used to hide questionable practices. This would require us to disclose donor identities, investment strategies, even board member compensation, he said. Transparency builds trust. It also drives away donors who value privacy. I leaned forward slightly. David, let me be direct. Jason Carr wasn't operating in isolation. The FBI investigation has uncovered a network of foundations, boards, and cultural organizations that were used to launder money and hide assets. His face went pale. You're not suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. The Whitmore Foundation received over $3 million in donations from Jason's shell companies over the past 2 years. Those donations are now part of a federal investigation. We had no way of knowing. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, you have a choice. Adopt these transparency standards voluntarily and demonstrate your commitment to ethical fundraising, or wait for the FBI to make the choice for you. The meeting ended with Whitmore agreeing to consider the proposal, which we both knew meant his. Attorney would spend the next week trying to figure out how to avoid federal scrutiny. I had similar meetings scheduled with 4 other foundation presidents over the next 2 weeks. The message was always the same. Clean up your act voluntarily, or have it cleaned up for you. By Friday, the results were starting to show. The Harbor Foundation announced new ethical guidelines for board membership. The Morrison Cultural Trust revealed that it was conducting an internal review of its donor relationships. 3 smaller organizations quietly asked their most questionable board members to resign. But the real victory came in an unexpected phone call from Patricia. Lila's attorney wants to meet, she said. Apparently, the Harbor Foundation has asked her to step down from the board. On what grounds? Association with Jason, damage to their reputation, questions about her judgment. The usual corporate death by 1,000 cuts. I felt that familiar cold satisfaction settling in my chest. When? This afternoon, if you're available. They're hoping to avoid a public embarrassment. The meeting was held in a generic conference room at Lila's attorney's office, neutral territory for what was essentially a surrender negotiation. Lila's lawyer, Margaret Chen, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in high-stakes divorces and reputation management. My client has been asked to resign from several board positions, Chen began without preamble. The Harbor Foundation, the Morrison Trust, the Cultural Preservation Initiative, all due to her association with Jason Carr. That's unfortunate, Patricia replied. The timing suggests coordination. A systematic campaign to destroy my client's reputation and livelihood. I spoke for the first time since entering the room. Your client chose to associate with a federal criminal. Choices have consequences. Lila, who had been silent throughout the opening exchanges, finally looked up from her hands. You did this. You destroyed Jason, and now you're destroying me. I'm not destroying anything. I'm revealing what was already there. I had nothing to do with Jason's crimes. But you had everything to do with choosing him over integrity, over character, over the man who actually loved you. Chen cleared her throat. Mr. Cole, my client is willing to expedite the divorce proceedings and waive any claim to marital assets in exchange for your agreement to cease any further interference in her professional relationships. What interference? The Harbor Foundation cited concerns about her judgment, specifically regarding her relationship with you and Jason. The Morrison Trust mentioned questions about her ability to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. I almost smiled. The foundation boards weren't responding to any pressure from me. They were simply doing what institutional powers always did when scandal threatened their tax-exempt status. They were cutting loose anyone who might contaminate their reputation. I haven't interfered with anything, I said. I've simply implemented new transparency standards for Meridian's philanthropic partnerships. If those standards create problems for your client, perhaps she should examine why that is. The meeting ended with no agreement beyond a promise to continue discussions. As we left the building, Patricia seemed almost amused. You really haven't done anything actionable, have you? No phone calls, no pressure, no threats? I've simply made it clear that integrity matters. that actions have consequences, that the social ladder Lila climbed was built on corrupt foundations, and now you're pulling that ladder away. I'm not pulling anything away. I'm just refusing to hold it up. That evening, I had dinner with Sam at a small French restaurant in the village. She'd been following the foundation's scandals in the press and understood exactly what was happening. "The ecosystem is collapsing," she said over wine and cocoa van. "All the boards and trusts and cultural organizations that provided cover for people like Jason, they're all scrambling to distance themselves from anyone who might bring scrutiny." Good. And Lila? Lila built her entire identity around her social connections. Without those connections, she's just another divorced socialite with expensive taste and no income. Sam studied my face in the candlelight. "Do you feel sorry for her?" I thought about it, really thought about it. No. I feel sorry for the woman I thought I married, the woman who turned out to be an illusion. And what happens now? Now we see who survives the audit. But even as I said it, I knew that my part in this particular story was nearly over. Jason was finished, Lila was marginalized, and the corrupt system that had enabled them both was slowly being cleaned up by federal investigators and nervous board members. The question was, what came next? 3 weeks later, I stood in the same boardroom where Jason's destruction had begun, but the atmosphere was completely different. The emergency board meeting had been called to discuss Meridian's new position as an industry leader in ethical investing, and the mood was celebratory rather than funereal. "The Morrison Meridian Cultural Investment Initiative has attracted over $50 million in new commitments," reported our head of business development. "Investors are specifically citing our transparency standards and ethical oversight as deciding factors." Around the table, board members nodded approvingly. In the space of a month, we'd transformed a potential scandal into a competitive advantage, positioning ourselves as the responsible choice for investors who wanted to avoid the kind of reputational damage that Jason's crimes had inflicted on other firms. "The SEC has also approached us about serving as a model for new industry regulations," added our general counsel. "They want to use our ethics protocols as a template for mandatory compliance standards." I signed the formal policy package that would govern all of Meridian's operations going forward. Mandatory disclosure of conflicts of interest, independent audits of all client relationships, public reporting of compensation and expenses, and zero tolerance for the kind of corner cutting that had made Jason's crimes possible. The same glass-walled boardroom that had witnessed Jason's downfall was now the site of Meridian's transformation into something cleaner, more accountable, more sustainable. After the meeting, I walked to my office and found Sam waiting in the reception area, looking elegant in a charcoal wool dress and holding what appeared to be champagne. "Celebrating something?" I asked. "The Harbor Foundation just announced my appointment as their new ethics officer," she said. "Apparently they need someone with experience in accountability and transparency." "Congratulations." We walked out onto the building's observation deck, 32 floors above the city, and looked out at Manhattan stretching toward the harbor. The October afternoon was crisp and clear, with the kind of light that made the city look like a photograph in an expensive magazine. "It's finished, isn't it?" Sam said. "Jason's in federal prison, Lila's been exiled from her social circle, and the entire system that enabled them is being reformed. The easy part is finished." She looked at me with raised eyebrows. "That was the easy part? Jason was guilty." The evidence was overwhelming. His destruction was inevitable once someone decided to act on what everyone already knew. And the hard part? I thought about the question as we stood there watching the city flow around us like a living organism. Below us, millions of people were going about their daily lives, working, striving, making the small choices that added up to character. The hard part is building something better, making sure this doesn't happen again. Creating systems that reward integrity instead of punishing it. Sam moved closer to me at the railing, close enough that I could smell her perfume and feel the warmth of her presence. And us? What happens with us? It was the question I'd been avoiding for weeks. Throughout the campaign against Jason, throughout the systematic dismantling of the corrupt network that had enabled him, Sam and I had been partners united by common purpose. But now that the war was over, what were we to each other? "I don't know," I said honestly. "We've been through something intense together, something that creates its own kind of closeness. But I'm not sure if what we have is real or just the adrenaline of shared victory, she smiled. Only one way to find out, which is time, patience. The chance to discover who we are when we're not defined by what we're fighting against. A text message interrupted the moment. Patricia, letting me know that Jason's sentencing had been scheduled for next month. 15 to 20 years, assuming he cooperated with the broader federal investigation into financial fraud in the philanthropic sector. Justice, Sam said, reading over my shoulder. Justice, I agreed. But as we stood there watching the sun set over Manhattan, I realized that justice was just the beginning. The real work, building something better, creating systems that couldn't be corrupted, ensuring that the next generation of investors and philanthropists operated with integrity rather than just ambition, that work was just getting started. My phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to discuss your role in the broader investigation into philanthropic fraud. Would you be available to meet next week? I looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, then at Sam standing beside me with her champagne and her new position and her quiet strength. I'll be available, I said. As we walked back inside, Sam touched my arm. Ready for the next phase? I thought about Jason in his federal prison cell, about Lila in whatever diminished life she was building from the wreckage of her social ambitions, about all the corrupt foundations and compromised board members who were scrambling to clean up their acts before the FBI knocked on their doors. Most of all, I thought about the choice I'd made in that restaurant 3 months ago when Lila had delivered my execution with a champagne smile. I could have fought for her, could have tried to win her back with flowers and promises. Instead, I'd chosen something harder and more permanent, the decision to stop paying for other people's ladders. Ready? I said. The city spread out below us like a balance sheet finally balanced, like a ledger where assets and liabilities were clearly marked and honestly reported. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was clean, and that was enough.